Hello, this is Shanna Mann, and this is another video on my life system. So in the first video, we talked about the task management system and kind of showed you how to organize things so that nothing falls through the cracks. And I also talked to you about the system's overview, as well as the weekly review, which is crucial. But this is my system, and if you're sitting through this, you probably want to know how to run your own system. So I will give you an example of how to do it if you are interested in creating this on your own. Resources that are really good is Michael Gerber's E-Myth Revisited, and Jenny Shi, that's SHIH, has a really great free resource called the System Flight Plan. You might want to check those out. So basically, these are the systems in my life. If this is the organization of how to run them, these are the actual systems. And you can think of them as like ecosystems. I'm kind of a fan of dynamic systems theory, so I geek out about this stuff, so I hope that I don't lapse into jargon or anything. So I have business, personal, and then general, and my general is pretty narrow. It's just the stuff that bridges general and personal. So I have email, I have info management, which is the sort of thing where if you're a big reader like I am, or if you have a job that you need to be constantly keeping up to date, one of my biggest frustrations is reading something and wanting to reference it and not being able to figure out where to find it. So info management is a system that I want to optimize. I just redid my life systems here. I divorced last year and moved cross country, so most of what I used to have in place has now become broken or defunct, so I needed to redo this anyway, so this was an excellent exercise for me. So we have personal systems. These are the personal systems. Each of them has a bunch of subsystems that I'm going to have to expand, but it's not really a high priority for me. I spent most of my time on the business aspect. So these are some of my businesses, and this is the one that you're most familiar with, no doubt. These are some of the systems that are here: blogging, marketing, newsletter, coaching, financial system, and other projects. These are more longer term or bigger stuff that I kind of have in the pipeline, not necessarily for my blog, but also like stuff that I'm collaborating on. It's kind of a catch-all category. For the financial system, you've got bookkeeping, taxes, marketing. Marketing, you have a great deal of things under here, or at least I do. Try to make it so it all fits in the YouTube window. As you can see, it gets quite complex, and all these little red pen marks are my shorthand of saying, fix this. So you can see that I'm not in any degree more organized, but this is a really great starting point for me. So if creating my system was a project, which it is, I will go through and pick something each week that I want to work on optimizing. Now, right now I have systems in place that, for financial at least, systems in place that are working quite well for me, but they need to be updated because it's been more than 6 months since the last time I did it. So essentially, anything that's also working for me that's already working for me still needs to be updated because there's this entropy problem, and even Einstein couldn't fix it. You just have to deal with it. So this is pretty boring for anyone who isn't me. So I'm just going to go really quickly through it and simply mention to you that you're going to want to do this sort of thing. Like I said, the two resources I mentioned earlier are a really good way of seeing how things fit together and what needs to be addressed. So, like, in the consultation call, I need to make sure that I have hit these points. So I need to create this checklist, which will include some of this stuff. This is what happens after the decision to move forward. All this stuff has to be dealt with within the scope of the scheduling call, and if I miss it on the call, I just have to email about it later. So it's incentive to get this all figured out once and for all, and then it just requires a trigger to execute. If you're familiar with programming, which I fake a lot more familiarity than I actually have, but if you're familiar with programming, these and the concept of if-then statements, this will make a lot of sense to you, these decision trees that you want to figure out. And essentially, all you're going to want to do when you start, after you've got your mind map, I really strongly recommend doing this mind map. It's really a great visual aid. But when you get started, you're going to want to start with something that you're already tops at. So there's a star beside email here, because if there's one thing that I'm good at, damn it, it is managing email. And so that's where I'm going to start, because you might as well get that easy stuff off your plate. If nothing is horribly broken for you, in which case, fix your pain points first. But if nothing is horribly broken, start with the stuff that you just pretty much have to rubber stamp in order to get it off your plate. So I would start by creating an SOP that includes procedures and possibly best practices. And the way I like to do that is to pretend like I'm explaining this to a VA or an intern who is going to take over handling my email. And I want to tell this person everything they need to know in order to never have to explain things to them again. So you want to be really, really thorough and think about, what kinds of ways this could be screwed up, where someone might have questions, and just in general be really thorough about it. And then if it's a really complex system, you might want to create a checklist that goes directly into the checklists where appropriate, which I need to find. Create checklist where appropriate, yes? And, if you can schedule it, obviously. There's not a whole bunch I can cover here that isn't much better covered in either the E-Myth Revisited, or Jenny Shee's system flight plan. But I just wanted to show you kind of how it looks like. I have a copy of this. Of course, it's not pretty like this, but I have a nested bullet points copy of this in my info binder, in my documentation binder, which includes copies and links to this stuff. But as a general practice, what I would do is I would also create nested folders within a document, like a Word file. I use office, but the same thing applies. So I would have one for each of my businesses, and then within that I would have folders for blogging systems, marketing systems, and each of those would have an SOP. So the idea is that each of these bubbles had damn well better have some documentation with it in order to direct the person reading to the appropriate resource. This often strikes people as overkill, and I'm not going to argue that it isn't, but it's thorough. And with any resource, you really want things to be thorough, because if they're not, then there's not a lot of incentive to go to that documentation first. Because it's not a guaranteed fix to whatever is your problem, you'll often try various shortcuts, which pretty much negates all of the work that you put into this. So think of it as a business investment, especially when you begin to scale, because as soon as you get big enough to need an office manager or a VA, or God forbid you should franchise whatever your business is, this will be worth its weight in gold. At least it is for me. It's not super sexy way to spend your time, but it is extremely useful, and as we have seen with the way that Japanese factories completely kill American factories, that kind of systematic improvement and doing the unsexy things instead of just working harder is really where you get all kinds of really lasting, scalable improvements in your business and in your life. I mean, this is equally applicable elsewhere. I just haven't gotten around to doing it. But I will be spending the next, I'm guessing, around 10 weeks to 3 months, working through this and making sure that everything has documentation. And once you have a system like this mind map in place, it just becomes a matter of, I'm going to do health and fitness and household this week and carry on. So this is really the nuts and bolts, nitty gritty, but I wanted to be thorough and show you how to do it for yourself if you were so inclined. So I hope that was at least mildly interesting to you and that you're not throwing virtual popcorn at me.